Shalom and welcome to Life Lessons number 51. And we are in the book of Deuteronomy, Chumash Devarim, and the section is called Nitzavim. You are standing today. And this is the one where Moses is speaking to everyone, Moshe Rabbeinu, on the day that he passed on. As we're going to see later on, he's going to tell everyone that he's about 120 years old, and this is his last day in life, and he's been reviewing with everyone everything that went on. And there's going to be some interesting statements here that he's telling them as he's now doing a covenant with them. We know that at Mount Sinai, that's 40 years earlier, their parents stood at Mount Sinai and heard and saw the revelation at Mount Sinai. Now they're about to enter to Israel. This is the second generation. So Moses is reaffirming with them the covenant that happened earlier on. What we see over here, he is committing the future and the present and the past that are all connected as one. As you know, there's that joke that they say out there that a future and present and past went into a bar and it was tense. So what do we see over here? So I'll read from the few verses and then you'll see what I'm talking about. So first, he's telling them, you are all standing today. And he's saying it as a general but very strong statement. You are standing firmly today, all of you, everybody that was in the camp. And he goes, he numbers them, the elders, your police officers, every Jewish person, you young children, your women, your converts within your camp, from those that, from your woodcutters till the water carriers. Everybody is there for what purpose? To bring you into a covenant with God. That God has established you as a people, as he had sworn to your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And here verse 13, 14 in chapter 29 says as follows. V'lo yitchem levatchem, not only with you, anochi koret et habrit hazot v'et ha'ala hazot, I am cutting this covenant and this oath, ki et hayshayeshna po imanu omed hayom, but rather it is with those that are here with us today, ve'et asher einenu po imanu hayom, and with those that are not here with us today. This covenant, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses makes it binding. He said it is with both. He's not saying, and also with those that are not here. He puts them on the same equation. This covenant is with those that are standing here with us today before God, and those who are not here with us today. The famous question that our commentators ask, how could you commit somebody into a covenant or into a commitment when they are not here? And we see that many times when somebody makes a promise to somebody else. So the commitment is between these two people that promised each other. Are the kids, are the children bound by that commitment? You may want to say, it'll be nice if they could continue that commitment, but you can't come and say that they are obliged to continue that commitment. But here we say That God says that this covenant that I'm making with all of you about being a people that will observe my laws and my commandments is not with just those that are standing there, it is with everyone. Now, some would say that maybe there were some people there that were not present when the covenant were there. Maybe they had to go to the restroom, so they were not there. But that's not what comes out here, because the verse says, you are all standing here firmly. So it means everybody was there when that covenant was happening. So obviously when it says, and with those that are not there, we're not talking about those that lived 3,300 years ago, but about those that live today, in our generation and in the generation to come. The great commentator Rashi comments a one-line thing that we're going to need to understand. He comments and he says, what does it mean, and those who are not here? He says it means those that are in the future generations. Those that are going to be in the future generations. So by him, it's understood, and he doesn't need to give any more explanation. It's understood. He has no problem saying that this commitment and this berit, this covenant, is even with the future generations. To understand why Rashi said it as a one-liner thing, let's bring in something interesting, because I was asking before, could parents commit their children? So here's an interesting question that's being asked, and something that we face it in our generations too. Let's say a parent that passed away and he owed money to somebody. Does that mean now that when the person passed on, that there's nobody from who to collect now? And let's say there's children. So now, if they don't have, so I could understand, but let's say the kids have, and let's take it more so. They inherited from their parents, and they have an inheritance. Could now someone come and say, listen, here's a document. Your father owes me this and this. Does he have the right to collect it? So we know that that is a discussion. And I'm sure in secular law, it happened, and there's ways to deal with it. But we could all see that if, for example, the argument is from the point of view of an inheritance, it may have some points to it that a person could collect. Says, hey, you've inherited so much, or whatever it is, so you need to pay me back. So we could see that there is some kind of an obligation that passes on from one generation to another generation. I'm not going to bring in the politics into it, but we know very well that whatever a government did a generation ago and spend and who knows what, so if we want or if we don't want, the next generation is obligated, and we pay for it or with our taxes or who knows what. So there is that responsibility from generation to generation. But here we're talking about what it's written here in the Torah. So our commentators are in general divided into two groups how to deal with it. And I'll bring up these two commentators and see why, according to Rashi, it's much simpler than that. So one group of commentators say this all has to do with inheritance. The same as children inherit from their parents, automatically they have inherited this covenant that God gave them in the desert as they are about to enter to Israel. So it is something that goes from generation to generation. So the minute somebody is born, and let's say his father, his grandfather, his great-grandparents, and going way all the way back till the times of Moses belong to this tribe, then automatically they are committed because that's what it is. So it's from the point of view of inheritance. And here I bring in back what I asked before, what will be if somebody owes money? So let's say that we all understand that if a parent owed somebody money, so we could say, I understand why children should be obligated to pay back. But let's say somebody comes to me with a note, you know, your grandfather or your great-grandfather owed me money and I never got paid back. And let's say that the descendant of those people are now demanding of the descendants of these. Say, well, you need to pay back. So now we're not talking about a generation ago. We're talking about a few generations ago. I almost feel that everyone would agree, here you're crossing the line, and nobody, even the most craziest court, is not going to come and say, you pay back. So here, what are we talking about? An inheritance and a commitment that God made with our great-great-great-great-grandparents 3,300 years ago in the desert here on the banks of Moab before they're going into Israel. And somehow I'm saying that should obligate even till today. So that's one direction, but we could see right away what the questions will be here. Another direction that a lot of people bring, some people bring, is that we are not talking about physically being there, but we talk about spiritually being there. That spiritually speaking, all the souls of the future generations were all there. And because of that, that makes it binding, because we would say, the person would say, well, I wasn't there. No, but your soul was there. So we could see that this one also could have some questions, because not everybody is ready to feel that spiritually and feel that way, that spiritually I'm bounded for many years ago. Somehow seems like from here we're talking about almost like physically you were there. Let me put it this way. If the rabbi called me and he says to me, I need you to come to synagogue, I will answer him, you know what, my soul is going to be there. If that's what we did, well, you said the commitment was with my soul. Okay, I'm sending my soul. My soul will keep kosher and I will go enjoy something else. My body will go enjoy something else. So we could see how there could be a little bit of holes in this thing. The only interesting difference will be between these two answers. If I say this is an inheritance, or I say it is because spiritually everyone was there, is an interesting question that comes up. We now are talking about those that are born to the tribe, children of the tribe. But we know over the generations, quite a few have converted and had become part of the tribe later on. So they can't come and say inheritance, because their great-great-grandparents were not there. They were somewhere else. So that answer won't work to say inheritance. That won't work for converts. So the only answer that will work, that I will say that spiritually their soul was there. But still, we need to understand what kind of an answer is that, the idea of spiritual. Let's understand this a little bit more, the difference between these two ideas, and then we'll come with the answer. Let's say somebody walked into synagogue, and as someone new, And as we are, we right away ask questions. When we see somebody new, we right away want to know why and when. That's nature. So we ask this individual, why did you come? And the person answers, because I was spiritually moved to come to synagogue. Now, I know, and you and the ones that are listening know, that this is good temporary. That kind of an answer is not going to last long. Because as long as that person is excited spiritually, it's going to work. But the minute that excitement is gone, we're not going to see them again. The other example will be, as you know, in Jewish law, there's such a thing of Kaddish. Kaddish is that when a beloved passed away, so for the next 11 months, the children of the deceased come to synagogue, and there's a special prayer that they say in memory of their parents, known as the Kaddish. So let's say a person walks into synagogue that we haven't seen before. We ask him, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm here because I need to say Kaddish. So then when somebody would ask him, so how long is that going to last? You don't need to ask. You know. That's what's probably going to be for the next 11 months. So that will be the point that it's connected with inheritance. He's continuing the tradition of the parents. The other one is talking about spirituality. Comes Rashi, and he explains something very interesting. And he says that this covenant is with the generations to come, and with those in future generation. He said it very simple. Rashi is the kind of a commentator that speaks even to a 5-year-old, that a 5-year-old should be able to understand it. If he needs to explain more, he brings more explanation. If something that it's very simple in his eyes, that he think that even a 5-year-old will understand, he will live it that way. So when Rashi comes in and says that this covenant was, what does it mean? With those that are not here, even with those that are in future generation, what does it mean? So the Lubavitcher Rabbi once explained, he said something very beautiful. When we're having that discussion about should parents obligate their children to pay their debts and things like this, inheritance, spiritually speaking, all these kind of things, and we have all our questions, because we are looking on it from a human being's point of view. And when we are looking on it from a human being's point of view, we are very limited in our understanding. Let's say that thank God we are very wise, but as wise we are going to be, there's still a limit how much we're going to be able to understand about God himself. So in the beginning of the Chumash, of the 5 books of Moses, going back to segment 1, where it said, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. There's a famous commentator known as the Nachmanides, and he wrote as follows. When it's written, God created, the word bara in Hebrew, created heaven and earth, means that he created time. That there is a point before the creation that it is above time. And when we talk above time, that means we're past, present, and future are all there the same by God. It's hard for us to understand because we are living in this time zone, time world here. It's hard for us to understand what does it mean beyond time. Actually, it will be like the opening that I was saying. It is very tense to have all this together. And it's an amazing thing. In the movie world out there, the most successful movies is all about time travel. And everyone is fascinated how you create all these things, how you could see the future, and all these kinds of things. But really, really, that's God. By God, yesterday, the day before, tomorrow, and the next day, the next year, it's all the same. So here's something very interesting. When he comes and says, I'm making a covenant with you, it doesn't have to be that I obligate your parents and therefore it will be an inheritance. It doesn't have to be that we're talking about spiritually. It means with each one of us the way we are. Because by him, the time barrier is not a difference. So we are thinking to ourselves, well, they were standing there 3,300 years ago. When we read it today and we say you are standing today, it's talking about us ourselves, that he's committing us the way we are. And then I don't need to say that we're talking about our souls. And then, because then very easy, somebody will say, okay, let my soul keep kosher. Let my soul go to synagogue, as I mentioned before. Or an inheritance. Inheritance is a limit to inheritance. A person comes and says, you know, my great-grandfather went to Yale. My grandfather went to Yale. My father went to Yale. I went to Yale. So therefore, my dear son or daughter, you need to go to Yale. And the kid thinks about it and says, that's great that all of you went to Yale. I really want to go to Silicon Valley. Are you going to argue with this? So you come and scream inheritance. Inheritance is a plus, no question. But to say that it should obligate, that could be a little bit tough. So here we come and say, just think about it. That is the same situation as those that were there physically. It is the same thing for us that are right here now. And this will answer a very interesting question. Here, it says as follows. In verse 13, he says, and not only I am making this covenant with you, and then he continues in verse 14, but with those that are standing here and with those that are not here. The question is, why are you repeating yourself? You just said before, and not only with you. So I already know that he's talking about those that are there. So why is he repeating? But my covenant is with those standing here and with those that are not here. Comes the Rabbi and says, because they both equal. It's not that those that were there have more rights than those that are not there. Both the same. God says, because of my position that I am God, I can make the commitment with you guys that are right there and with all the future generations just the same, with no changes whatsoever. So nobody could come and say, he was talking to my great-grandparents. He wasn't talking to me. Can't say that. We hear many times some people say, well, the Torah was given in a desert. So maybe all this doesn't apply in a regular living place. Or the Torah was given summertime. Maybe it doesn't apply when it's winter. So you have to come to Vermont, where sometimes the seasons are mixed up a little bit. But anyways, what this is telling us is you are standing today, the same as God is an eternal God. That's the kind of a power that he gives us. And what comes very beautiful about this is, because we know that one of the things that is mentioned in this section also, God promises that you will return In other words, you will repent. You will repent. It's an interesting discussion about the whole idea of repentance because in Hebrew, teshuvah means return, to return to God. And really what it is, it's a major gift. I always said, imagine you're standing in front of a judge. You're being sentenced about something that you did no good. And you say, Judge, wait a second, I repented. No, it doesn't work for most times. Maybe later on you could get off with good behavior. But God tells us to begin with, you know what? If you ask me forgiveness, I will forgive. This is a special gift that he gave us because then he elevates us above time. In time, there is all these terrible things that maybe had happened. But when a person is ready to turn a page, he could elevate, she could elevate themselves above that and connect themselves to the forgiven God. And that's what it means over here. You are all standing firm today. May we all merit to do the right thing and make this world a better world.